And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Chris Oberle, who's going to talk about the market research that we've done.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you for the applause. I'm going to talk today about the research that we conducted for OPPD. First, a little bit about Market Strategies International. I'm the Senior Vice President at Market Strategies International. They want to show me instead of the beautiful slide we have. There we go. I'm Senior Vice President of Market Strategies International. We're the largest utility research firm. We conduct hundreds and hundreds of studies every year for research. We have specialized and published many studies on consumer demand and acceptance of energy efficiency, renewable, environmental aspects, and all that. So what we conducted here for OPPD was a two-pronged research approach in order to gain customer insights on the types of resource options that they were looking at. The first one is a quantitative survey methodology. Collected surveys across the territory, random, bought the sample ourselves, went to data collection mode on the end of March through the first week of April. And questions focused on, as you saw here, economics, environment, power resources, fuel types. We also conducted a qualitative. That gave us the numbers, demand, and some of the quants that you'll see today. We also conducted qualitative research in order to get consumers' input and their points of view and attitudes towards all these different aspects. We conducted 8 residential focus groups, 1 business focus group. Those were conducted the first 3 days of April, very busy week. And discussion focused on, again, the trade-off of the resource attributes that you see really around the room today, discuss particularly each one of the scenarios that Rob went through. So how was the quantitative conducted? Quantitative was conducted by showing 16 paired scenarios. And by that I mean there were 16 statements, all with trade-offs on cost, as well as fuel, cost, renewable, greenhouse gases, cost versus energy efficiency and consumption management. So each one of those was rotated, right? And the trade-off then provided a value. Through different scenarios and through different modeling, we were able to get to a value to show which scenarios resonated the best, had the highest demand, if you will, across the general OPPD population. One of the pieces here was conventional emissions. What we asked about that was, with a 50% reduction in the emissions levels of pollutants, would you pay a price of 3% more on the bill? And you can see that customers were willing to make that trade-off. They will pay up to 3% more in that scenario for that 50% reduction in emissions of air levels. Number 2, and you'll see these little bursts around the graphs. That's OPPD's current plan, where they want to get to. And you see that maintain the OPPD's current emission reduction plan and maintain the current pricing level at the same time. Both of those scored high as well. Frankly, what this really says is customers will take a little bit more cutting back emissions to pay a little bit more of their bill. You see this line here. You see that line in the middle? It's because the average response would have been 6.25%. So anything above that has higher demand. Anything below that is not as attractive to customers. And so you'll see that with a 60% reduction in emissions, getting to a 15% increase in bill, and then the 70% reduction in emissions with an increase of 30% in the bill, did not score that high. There is a point at which they believe that for their own personal balance sheets, it becomes economic to support. And that's where it comes out to. And that's kind of the right sizing and balancing act that I think OPPD is looking to play right now. Another thing is greenhouse gases, right? So we had the conventional emissions from the plants that you have, also greenhouse gases. 22% reduction in emission levels on greenhouse gases with a price increase of 3%. Good acceptance. Again, 10% for the conventional emissions, virtually the same scenario, comes back to the greenhouse gases, 9.2%. And again, OPPD's current plan of reducing greenhouse gases and maintaining by 18% and maintaining current pricing scores well as well. But again, customers are also saying, you can do a little more. We're willing to pay a little more to have a little bit more reduction in greenhouse gases. But then it gets to that famous 10% level. We find this kind of a standard across the country. When customers start to see a 10% increase in the bill, they do start to push back. And that's what it's butting up to, I think, on the bottom two as well. So definite concern about emissions, definite concerns about greenhouse gases, and really intensively thinking about how much can I afford and how much can I contribute to helping with that. Then the next one is renewables. This is the one where OPPD's current plan on renewables strikes a chord with customers and actually rated the highest of the different renewable options. Particularly pushing the renewables to 33% by 2018, as Rob suggested, scored really well, especially maintaining the current electricity levels. That was the most attractive renewable option with 9.4%. This is an increase, and they did note that this is an increase from the current levels. There was a increase the share to 35% from even the 33% plan, increasing that to customers. Still had attractiveness as well, above that 6.25. So maybe even a little bit more on the renewable before it gets to a pain point. But definitely the strongest scenario right now is OPPD's current plan of that 33%. And then, of course, below that, as it starts to go up, and 9% increase only got rendered 4%. And then a 12% increase in the bill rendered only 2.5%. Again, I think that customers, again, very smartly are making trade-offs between we need to do more, they recognize there's more to do, and we need to make it economic at the same time. So one of the more popular ways to make it economic, actually, was the questions we asked around energy efficiency, energy savings, right? The DSM programs, as Rob was referring to them. Increasing spending on financial incentives, may reduce the need by 4.5% in the future, right? You saw the bar where, we're going to be demanding more in Omaha compared to what's planned and what's out there right now. So they see that, and they see that they can play a role with that, even if it changes rates. So they start self-funding that for those who want to take advantage of it and paying 2% more for that. Another one of 7.5% for the 2.5% rate. Cut it by 10.5% for a 3% increase. All those actually scoring above OPPD's current plan. The current plan of saying, these efforts may reduce the need by 1.5%, maintain this level at current electricity pricing. Again, what they're saying is they're willing to contribute more to help OPPD finance upgrades and energy efficiency programs and education among its customers. That's something else that came here. That's one that the OPPD can do a little bit more on, is what the research shows. So as we look at that, just a lot of the data, but what it really boils down to is that customers are willing to rely on OPPD. We got this from the qualitative. We'll look a little more about the qualitative focus group opinions in a little bit. But one of the things that came out of that is we rely on them. They're making good choices. You saw that their portfolios scored fairly high, and they think they're in the right direction. They think, frankly, they can do even a little bit more in certain cases. However, they're relying on OPPD to make those decisions, and they think they're doing a good job overall. They also think they're getting a good value on power right now, that there's not that it's a manageable amount and a bill that they can actually manage going forward. The cost concerns, these cost concerns and the ability to manage, though, do tip the other environmental and energy supply pieces towards a little bit more of a negative if it gets too much. So there is a barrier at which customers don't want to pay that much more for those initiatives. One of the things is to remember is that the renewables did score high, that the conventional emissions and greenhouse gases of the current portfolio was second. Maybe a little bit more can be done, and certainly a lot more can be done on the efficiency programs as customers looked at that. One of the things we'll find out is from some of the themes, I should say, if I can spit that out, that came out of some of the qualitative groups, though, is that the rural customers were more concerned about economic development and employment. Okay, they're very concerned in that. They're very concerned about cost, but they're also concerned about, we have plants and we run them, and it has an impact on the economy. And so that did come out. These are some extra thoughts that came out of those. Most customers were not in favor of short-term retrofitting in their mind. Obviously, the mechanics and engineering of it wasn't really explained to them. However, they did think that if you're going to retrofit something for a short-term use and then take it down, or if it's going to be something that's uneconomic to OPPD, they weren't necessarily in favor of that. They were interested in reliability in the economy as primary drivers. Obviously, those are the two things that they were going to have: keep the lights on, make it economic. There's broad skepticism about, even though, and here's where a dichotomy happens, even though you saw efficiency programs, DSM, energy savings programs scored pretty high. Customers would like OPPD to invest in those pieces. However, they also said, I don't want to be made to have to buy new things though, right? Because until my refrigerator breaks, I'm not going to buy a new refrigerator. Comments like that were very common in there. And so they think that there should be programs there for people to take advantage of, but they don't know, and there was an overwhelming, we're going to do that ourselves tomorrow and invest in new equipment around the house. Just because of that. However, what it does, and they do need, they would like those programs to be in place, and they would take that into account. Also, they expect OPPD, the reliance that we found that was on OPPD to make the decisions is because they believe that OPPD should have done the homework. This is kind of what we pay you for kind of thing. We pay you to make sure there's enough demand. They're taking care of the environment. They're taking care of the economic factors as well at the same time in the fuel sources. So we expect you to be able to make those trade-offs in our best interest and the best interest of the air as well as best interest of Omaha. Focus groups awareness of energy. We talked generally about energy. Energy related to really three things. They said there's some that said it's about fuel. Energy is about the type of fuel being used, right? Others would say it's about cost. How much energy to me means it has a cost, and there's a barrier at which I don't want to pay more. Others said that it's a utility, that the utility should control it. I want to take kind of a hands-off approach. So their orientations for fuel were very different. Most feel that the energy in the area was not overpriced, that they're getting a good value. Customers also believe that the environmentally friendly resources are very important, solar, wind technologies, for instance. However, there's an impression right now that could be an expensive way to go if that's the way that OPPD starts to move. And they said that with the backdrop of understanding a lot and having a perception that OPPD uses a lot of coal and nuclear to power Omaha, not much awareness that we found on the peaking gas facilities or wind facilities that OPPD has right now. There wasn't that much awareness of that within the groups. They're also aware of the coal burning issues. There was a great understanding that, hey, emissions and coal's dirty and it can pollute the air. But at the same time, they do think that it produces a lot of power, can help create reliability, can help fill a lot of the demand, as well as it can be much more rationalized on price and offer perhaps a lower cost. So those are some perceptions of energy right now, just perceptions that they came in with. Lastly, these are general impressions across the base. The trade-offs were general impressions. That's what most people said, all those types of things. What's best for Omaha as a whole? I want to recognize, though, here in this slide, that there are three camps. There was a camp that was very cost concerned, very economically driven, economic development. The business groups that we had really talked about a lot about economic development, about controlling costs, keeping reliability to keep my facility on, and also keeping a cost that could attract other businesses and help build the community at the same time. So there's a lot of that, a lot of very economically driven group, if you will. There's also a very environmental segment. There's a segment that would say, you know what, I think we need to think about what we're going to provide to future generations. I think we need to be good global citizens. There's a whole group of that as well. And then at the same time, what we're calling the energy rationalist in the middle was by far the greatest group, though. The one where the preponderance of a lot of the opinions came from, which is, we call them rationalists because they're willing to ration and think about how much, improve the environment, great. Bring on enough demand, great. You know, control costs, great. However, it should be done in a managed, rationed fashion, and all things should be considered at the same time. So that's where you get some of the, we want you to improve your dedication to renewables or to greenhouse gases, but at a certain cost level. They also tend to be what they call, and this was out of the focus groups, Nebraska ethic for self-control and self-reliance. So in other words, they're saying, I don't necessarily want to be told what to do. However, give me the ability to do that, inform me, make the right decisions, and I think we'll get along fine. So those are kind of the key takeaways from the research we conducted.